I have a lot of respect for my father, and it's only grown since I became a dad myself. He is a great father, and he was growing up, and he also had the patience of a saint, but on top of that, he's a self-made millionaire, and he took steps to ensure that I became the same. And despite this modest wealth that he built for himself, he gave me a foundation that money just can't buy. And in this video, I'm going to give it to you so you can apply it to yourself or give it to your kids. My dad came from very little and he built himself a decent life. And while his dad, my grandfather, was successful, my grandfather also had that boomer mentality of giving his son nothing. In fact, he gave him like a little less than nothing. But throughout all that, my dad managed to build a life for his family from the ground up. And fortunately, he broke that cycle of selfishness that my grandfather was hell-bent on perpetuating, and he managed to give all three of his kids a leg up, and now that I'm a father myself, I'm able to do the same for my growing family. And I'm not here to gloat or anything like that about the childhood that I had, or how well off my father is, or how well off I am for that matter. This is me just distilling the lessons that he gave me, and a partial homage to him and all the efforts and pains, assuredly, that he went through to make sure that all three of his kids were able to get a leg up in the world. And then you'll be able to take these things that he taught me and apply them to your children in your pursuit of creating generational wealth for your family.
You're watching Dynasty Foundry.
The first thing my dad did for me, or the first thing that came to mind, I'm not going to be able to cover everything in this video, was that he gave me an apprenticeship and a good work ethic. So when I was about 16, 17, I actually dropped out of school, and I was done with it for a few different reasons. I wasn't bad at school or anything like that, I just didn't enjoy it. And I went in to go and apply for this job, and I lasted a day, it wasn't for me. And so my dad wound up giving me just work. He was just saying, hey, why don't you come along and see what it's like before you go and apply for any other jobs. So I went along with him. He said, give it 2 weeks and see if you like it. And he's an electrician by trade, and he had his own business, so he could kind of get away with this. And let me into the work sites that he went to, and I copped a lot of flack. I would have just turned 17, so copping flack from the guys and this and that, and it was interesting. It was eye-opening for me, and it turned out I was quite good at the work. And so I wound up, quite taking to it. And I think my dad kind of determined that from a young age, because he gave me this electronics kit, and I was done with it in like a day. Make a radio, do this and that, little breadboard thing. But when I was sick of it, I decided to take the pieces in it and build wire up my sister's playhouse. So my sisters had this playhouse, and I basically took some wire out of my dad's shed and a whole bunch of we either had copper or iron nails, I forget now, and I made a lemon battery, and I stuck it in this little bench they had and wired up the whole playhouse with this lemon battery, so they had lights and little PowerPoint that didn't actually work. But I wired it all up. My dad went in there with his voltmeter and tested it, and I was like, well, that's actually worked, And from that, he actually started taking me to work sites with him, just to help him out and organize things. I was young. But as a result, it gave me work exposure. And whilst during the apprenticeship I was not always the ideal apprentice or ideal son for that matter, he had the patience of a saint, and he took me under his wing and gave me an exposure to a lot of different people, which also helped me grow a network that would later help me expand my own business as well. So I realized that not everyone's in the position to take their kids to their work or anything like that, but one thing that you can do is give them exposure to a lot of different things, which is what my dad did. And also you can work with your kids as well and help build that work ethic in them. So one thing that I do with my boys now, who are quite young, 5 and 2 at the time of recording, I take them out onto our land and we work every day. I teach them how engines work, I teach them how to plant trees and how to mow lawns and how to care for animals. And all these things are helping build a work ethic in them, to such the point where my older son, he likes going out and just working for the sake of working. Obviously with an outcome in mind, like he might build something or he might go and dig a hole for the idea of putting a plant in it, but he just likes doing that. And he's built a really good work ethic from it, and he will find a task and he will stick to it until he's done. So if you can give that to your kids, then that's a massive win, and it will really set them up in a world full of people who don't particularly like work. The next thing my dad did for me was he let me live at home. Now, a lot of times in the West, we have this idea that we need to kick out our kids at 18 because it's going to harden them to the world. But that's a very boomer mentality. Prior to that prosperous era of late 40s to 60s, which is where this kind of this idea originally stemmed from. It was very normal for children to live at home until they were married. And whilst I wasn't married when I moved out, my dad did let me live at home till I was around about 25. Now I did pay him rent. There was no free rides. I paid rent and I did my fair share of work around the property. And this actually let me bank up money, not only because I was paying a small amount of rent versus what I would be paying to rent a place of my own, but also because the business shared workload, and it freed up a lot of time for me to work in like basically insane hours. Now it might be difficult for me to comprehend this now because I don't think I could do this as a tradesman, though I do work a lot now. But as a tradesman, I was working 90 plus hours a week for somebody else, not for my own business at the time when I was living with him. Like, I finished my apprenticeship with him, and then I, through my network, was able to get this basically unlimited hour job, and I would just work like as much as I possibly could. And that let me save up quite a lot of money, obviously, because I had very minimal expenses because it was all shared throughout the family. And that let me put away quite a bit, and I put that into investments, rental properties, stocks, things like that. And also let me be a little bit more risky with a few businesses that I started, and some of which I sold as well. So letting your kids live at home, huge head start, especially today. I mean, we look at the price of property now and it's like insane. So yeah, I'm very grateful he let me do that, and it also taught me to be more respectful of the people that I'm living with as well. Because obviously you're going to butt heads with people, especially your parents, when you're living with them for that long. So it was a very advantageous experience for me doing that. Now, you can argue the opposite. You could say, living with other people is going to teach you a lot. But ultimately, what I want to do with my family is a form of modern, it's called progeniture. So primogeniture. So that is when basically your oldest children or oldest child, usually a son, would take over the property from you. Now you can kind of evolve this a little bit and have it so your children live with you and then they inherit the property, and that way you're kind of keeping everything tied up together and making sure that you're giving your children a lot of advantages. And this was something that was ordinary throughout basically all of Europe for most of European history, and we've lost it in the last 100 years or so. So by taking this and adapting this and allowing your kids to live at home a little bit longer, you're going to give them a huge leg up, and you're kind of creating like this safety net for them, where if they want to start a business or they want to study, or maybe they want to try a few different things, you're not forcing them out into the world where basically there's a net outflow from your family of wealth to other people purely for the maintenance of their basic needs and basic living standards. So that will give your children a huge leg up, and I'm very grateful that my father did that for me. Go!
You're watching Dynasty Foundry.
So the next thing that my dad told me that was really important for me was to not let my money sit idle. My dad was pretty conventional when it came to make sure you have your savings account, put things in a high interest savings account, pay off your mortgage. Wasn't a huge investor. Now, he did invest at points, and I remember specifically from when I was a child, and he was talking about I think it was the airport was being nationalized, and it was a good teaching moment that he kind of missed out on, frankly. He asked me if he would always put money away into a savings account for me, even though I was a child. I think it was like $20 a week or something. He would just tuck away, not do anything with, but he was going to give it to me when I turned 18, and he did. But one thing that he taught, I guess failed to teach me but introduced me to it at the same time, is he asked if I wanted to put the money in that savings account into the stock. We call them shares here. And he said, you can buy, I don't know, like 40 shares or something like that in this airport. And I said, well, what does it do? And he says, well, it's like you're owning a piece of the airport. And I was like, also like a car park that someone will pay me for. And my mum joked and said, it's more like a light bulb. And then they laughed and kind of shrugged it off a bit. And in my head, that gave me almost like a negative association with shares or stocks at the time. But it was an introduction to the fact that your money can own a piece of something. Now we fast forward 6 years, and we work for a company, and they have shares, and there's like an employee buy-in plan. There's a guy there that's encouraging the employees to go into the plan, and so I am encouraged by my father to go up and talk to him about what it's all about. And he said, look, you're 17 or whatever. You can't get one yet, but when you turn 18, you can open up a stock account, and then you can buy shares in this company, and they're publicly listed. And I was like, dumb kid, scratching my head and stuff like that. And so he told me to go and buy this book. So I went and I bought this book by Martin Hawes. I forget what it's called, just like an introduction to an investment, something really basic. He's basically like a New Zealand guy. So I read his book and basically became enamored and transfixed. So when I was like 18, I had my share account ready, like application ready to go, all signed, ready to open, and I managed to buy into a couple of companies, and they eventually managed to mature. And I was talking to my dad about it the whole time, and he's like encouraging me. Like, he had his own broker, but eventually, because it's a pain to go through brokers and they kind of rip you off a little bit, he wound up going for the online one, which was cheaper for him, and then we kind of connected over these shares that we'd buy. And when I sold out a couple of them, I think I was waiting for payment for a business that I owned at the time. I used to sell SD cards, and I went to go check to make sure the payment had gone through, because at lunchtime I would go and drop the parcels off at the post office. And my dad walks past and sees my bank account, and there's a relatively large number for someone my age in there. I think in mind I'm like 18 or something at the time. So I showed him, the brokerage account. He goes, "Oh, okay. Oh, you got to buy a house." And I did not want to buy a house. Like, I had it in my head, I wanted to just buy some land and like live off the land, like, a river cottage style. It's basically like a guy who's like glamorizing, living off the land, even though he's making money off his TV show. So I had to like fix in my head that that's what I was going to do. But he and my mother basically dragged me along to go and look at these. They had a list of houses, but the first one we went to, I made an offer. Like, I had a look and I was like, "Oh, look, how much is this going to be worth?" So I just made like a cheeky offer, basically, and he accepted. And that he said, "There's the same offer as I got from these other people, but I like you more. I'll sell it to you if you can sign the paperwork tonight." And so I said, "Yeah, sure." So he came over to our house with his brother, and we signed all the paperwork, due diligence, and make sure I can get financing, because I couldn't afford the house in full. And with that, I managed to get my first home. And I mean, rental horror stories, and I'll save them for another time, but I managed to get my first house when I was about 18, maybe it was 19, but I think it was somewhere around like late 18, early 19, age-wise. And that like set me up, like in terms of like building a financial basis, foundation. And if my dad didn't help me with that and help me make sure I was putting my capital to good use and making sure I was buying assets that made sense in the current economic climate, I just wouldn't be in the position I am now. So yeah, teaching your kids not to let their money idle and sit and do nothing, teaching them about asset classes, what to invest in, and encouraging them as well as they earn money, and maybe even making it a form of bonding as well, can be a really good tool for them. And I'm doing that for my kids now. All three of my kids have investment portfolios. I put a little bit away from them, and I take them to actually look at the investments that they've made. I took them to the airport the other day to look at their planes, which I'm very excited about, and just educating them on the way that the world of finance works, and making sure it's from a very young age, and so they can kind of understand that they not only need to be productive members of society and productive members of the family, but that they need to make their money productive as well. So I'm very grateful my dad taught me that, and it's something that you should be teaching your kids as well. This is one that for a lot of people is hard to swallow. We're taught a lot in life that we need balance, balance, this and that, but there's not been a single person that has built a very successful business or a very successful life that has had balance in the way that it's kind of peddled to us. So all these people, like gurus you call them, that talk about balance, you need to be balanced in your life. Oh, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right? This is all BS, right? All the successful people have worked a lot and put off this so-called balance for later. And you can find like a temperamental kind of balance where you work extremely hard and then have a period of rest, and then work extremely hard and have a period of rest. But trying to achieve balance is the pathway to mediocrity. And my dad taught me this very young. I was the kind of guy who just wanted to, play video games and smoke things I shouldn't be smoking, and drink and hang out with my friends and things like that. And fortunately, I managed to stop doing that very young. I could have gone on a very bad path, but thanks to my dad's patience and him kind of taking me under his wing as a young man that could have very easily been lost, he taught me that resting later is imperative. Now, the nature of his business, he was an electrical contractor. He had consistent clients where you do maintenance work for, so we repaired a lot of machinery. There was periods in time where we would get a big contract, and these big contracts would just go, 12 hours a day, work as much as you can, the job's got to be done. You don't want to slip behind, because typically, like electricians, you are holding other people up as well, so there's a lot of pressure on you. And these periods of immense work were very gratifying to see come to fruition as they played out. And then on top of that, you had to be juggling these other clients with breakdowns and things like that. So it was a very important lesson for me that there are periods of our life where we have to work a lot. And when I say work a lot, I mean a lot. Like, there was a period of my life where I was working 100+ hours a week, because that was when I could get the capital. And I wanted to put the capital underneath me, and so I went and I got it. And then there are other times when you can rest, and there have been periods in my life where I have not had as many projects on, and funnily enough, those have been some of the unhappiest times of my life. So understanding that there's always time to rest later, but when there's an opportunity, you've got to seize it. Incredibly valuable lesson. And if you're trying to build a business, like what my dad did, he built his business from nothing with no leg up or anything like that, just purely through his grit and hard work and risk taking. And it's not like a huge business or anything like that, but it was enough to sustain a family and sustain him and build a very decent portfolio of what he has now. From essentially what it was, a one-man business, then I jumped into it a little later, and also hiring contractors. We did very well in that regard, and it all come from periods of immense work and finding the balance when the balance is there to be had. But when there's work, you work, and you make sure you work as hard as you can, and you draw on the resources that you have. So that was like a huge lesson for me. And if it wasn't for him and his work ethic, then I just wouldn't be anywhere near where I am today.
You're watching Dynasty Foundry.
Another thing that my dad did to me along the lines of work is that he actually encouraged me to go away to work. Now, when I worked for him, he would send me away to go and work for other people when I was doing my apprenticeship, and that way I got a lot of different experience with a lot of different people, and I found what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. Like, I really hated domestic work, and I really hated working with this one guy. I won't say his name, but he was just a real, he was a young guy. He was like me. He was a little bit older than me, but he was a young guy, and he was just like such a pain to work with. It just drove me nuts, and it made me realize you got to pick the right people to work with. They got to share similar values and similar work ethic, and also by going away to work, like I could have worked for my dad, until this day, but by going away to work, I managed to pick up new skills that he lacked, and then I would bring them back into his business, and suddenly we could fix things that we couldn't fix before. One example of this is I learned power factor correction. Now, this is like a standard fair thing that you learn in school anyway, so it's maybe not the best example, but I went and I learned power factor correction at school, and I was also doing like supplemental classes that were completely optional. I went and did night classes in electronics, I went and did like night classes in PLCs, and through this combination of things, I figured out how to best determine how much power was being wasted by our biggest customers by their bad power factor. And so I worked out how much money a company was wasting by not having power factor correction units or not having working ones, and then we would take this calculation to the customer. Like, you could ring up the power company with their permission, get their bills and get their power factor, which is recorded by the company, and then calculate it based off that, and it would save them literally thousands of dollars a month. And so if you can save a company thousands of dollars a month, they will pay you tens of thousands of dollars. And so I figured out how to work this out and how to get the bills, and I basically made like a spreadsheet we could plug it into with Excel, and it was like a really easy process. Made a pre-templated letter, and I did it for all of our biggest customers. Some of them would save hundreds, most would save thousands, and so when they would save thousands, we would say, okay, we have a crowd that we work with. I managed to source these capacitors and units and boxes and everything for us to install, and we installed these power factor correction units for our biggest customers and made tens of thousands of dollars in the process, profit of doing it. And because I was making my dad money and our company money, he would cut me in on it. So he was like, if you can find the power bill, if you can do all the work, if you can source it all, I'll cut you in. So I managed to do this for all of our biggest customers and got this huge influx of capital coming into me as a young man. I think it was like 19 when I did this, maybe 20. No, it would have been about 19. And so I was getting big chunks of money coming in that I was able to then go and reinvest back into my stock portfolio, back into my business ventures, back into my property portfolio. So it was like a huge benefit for me to know that that skill from just being sent away to other places to learn these things. And this is an important thing that you'll see a lot of wealthy families do, is that they will send their children away. Even if they have a very successful business, they will always send their child away to work. Usually when they're an adult, it might be they'll go to college, it might be they will go and work for someone else. Typically it's go and work for someone else as well, but it really just depends on the nature of the business. So good or perhaps bad example of this is Trump. He was sent to, I forget the college or university that he went to, but he went there, and that's how he built the basis of his network that he then came and brought back to his family business, which he later adapted into what we now know as the Trump Empire. But his dad used to own a whole bunch of, I think it was basically Section 8 housing, which was their family business, and Trump managed to snowball that into doing all the big commercial New York real estate that we know today. So that was an example of sending your child away to work, to build a network, to build skills, and then to bring them back into the family so then they can continue to expand and grow with the business rather than allowing it to slip into stasis or into a state where it's not growing and eventually entropy away. So making sure you send your kids away will help your family amass more wealth. So those were a few things that my dad did for me, and as I've grown older and I've had children of my own, I've learned to appreciate them a heck of a lot more. It's always the case, we're always going to appreciate things when we get older and we experience the oftentimes the pains that our own parents have been through. So maybe there's something that your dad did for you, or that you appreciate now, or that you're doing for your kids that you hope they appreciate in the future. You can let me know in the comments down below. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I appreciate you sticking around. It really means a lot to me. If you can do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe button so you can get more from me in the future, that'd be massive and really help me out, not only the algorithm, but help me learn what it is that you like about these videos so I can make more like them. And yeah, I appreciate you sticking around for the whole video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.